There are secrets the ocean has swallowed for hundreds of years. A pirate's journal, a tattered map, and a voyage where every step is paid with blood and lives. The explorers thought they were chasing gold, but what they found was the curse of the sea. And I, one of the few survivors, will tell you everything, every chilling detail. If you wish to journey with me, a new writer, still finding my way, please subscribe to my channel. Every subscription is like a small lantern, lighting up this long and stormy path of storytelling. Now, come with me into the tale, where the sea never forgets. My name is Jack Miller. 35 years old. People once called me a Marine, but when I look in the mirror, all I see is a man with a scar running from his left brow to his cheek, eyes hollowed out from sleepless nights, and breath heavy with cheap cigarettes. What's left of my service are the nightmares that never end, the habit of never turning my back on a door, and an emptiness so long and deep it feels eternal. First left the Corps after a mission gone wrong. 3 men from my unit didn't make it back, I did. They gave me a medal, but I knew the truth, it wasn't because I'd done anything heroic. It was because I was the only one still standing. Since that day, I stopped believing in the shiny lies about honor and glory. I drifted from city to city, took odd security jobs, led a few adventure tours for cash, and spent the rest of my time at the bottom of a glass. That night was no different. New Orleans was sweltering, thick with rum, sweat, and the sound of tired jazz spilling from the shadows. I sat alone, staring at a flat beer, trying to drink away the ache in my shoulder as the weather turned. Then Emily Carter walked in. She stood out at once. White shirt, jeans, hair tied back, her stride sharp and certain. Her eyes burned with something secret, something big enough to set the world on fire. She came straight to my table, no greeting, just dropped a heavy object onto the wood. A brown leather journal, its edges frayed, its clasp rusted and broken. "Do you believe in fate, Jack?" she asked, her voice low but steady. I glanced at it, smirked. "I believe in cold beer more." She didn't smile, just pushed the book toward me. I opened it reluctantly. The smell hit me first, damp paper, saltwater. My throat tightened. On the yellowed pages sprawled jagged handwriting, the brown ink faded and blotched, marked with strange symbols. I read aloud, my voice rough. Day 13 at sea. Southeast winds. We sank a Spanish ship. Gold fills the hold, but the blood of 20 brothers stains the deck. The captain says, "This treasure will feed our children's children." I only see the sea demanding its debt. I looked up. Emily's eyes shone brighter than the bar's jaundiced lights. "Well, pirate log," I muttered, snapping it shut. "Not just that." She pried gently at the spine. A thin, brittle slip of paper fell out onto the table. I picked it up. My heart stumbled. A map. Crude but deliberate lines. Scattered islands drawn across an empty sea. At the center, a grinning skull. Beside it, blurred Latin words, Quod mare celit, mors custodit. I murmured the translation, "What the sea hides, death will guard." Emily nodded. "Now you understand." I laid the map down, lit a cigarette, drew deep. "What do you want from me?" "Come with me." I laughed dryly. "Do you know how many people have died chasing scraps of paper like this? I've seen their corpses washed ashore, still clutching fake maps." Emily didn't flinch. "Black Henry was real. He terrorized the Caribbean. They say his treasure was buried with traps and curses. You don't need every clue to be true. You just need one. And this one isn't fake." I stared into her eyes. They weren't dreamer's eyes. They were the eyes of someone who'd already decided, even if it meant death. I'd seen that look before, on the faces of young soldiers just before they charged. I exhaled slowly. "If you're going, you'll need a crew. And if you need a crew, you need me." Her smile cut sharp and clean. I took the journal back to my room. That night, sleep never came. I spread it open under the yellow lamp, the words swimming in the dim light. I read them again and again, until I could hear the waves, the screams, the rattle of chains. One entry read, "The sea does not forget. Those who take its gold will leave their lives. We hid it on Crescent Island. The stone gate will open when the new moon devours the shadow, the southeast wind fills the sails, and 3 bells toll." I shut the book and leaned back, the smell of blood and iron rising in memory. It felt like war all over again. And I knew this wasn't a game. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the only 3 names that mattered. Sarah Lopez. Documentary filmmaker. Reckless, hungry for danger to put on tape. I called. The phone rang long, then her voice, Jack. What insane thing are you dragging me into this time, a voyage? Far. Dangerous. I'm in. Tommy Harris. Mechanical engineer. Greedy, but brilliant. I've got a ship. Needs fixing. There might be gold. If there's money, I'm there. David Clark. Puerto Rican sailor. Quiet. Once hauled me out of a storm. I need you. Silence, broken only by the sound of surf at his end. Then, the sea is calling. I have to answer. I'll come. 3 calls. 3 answers. 3 lives bound to mine. And I understood, we'd just stepped into a game where the sea itself would be judge. The next morning, I met Emily again at a cafe by the harbor. I set the journal on the table. They said yes. She asked. I nodded. She smiled. Outside, the ocean gleamed like a mirror, but I didn't see beauty. I saw cold eyes waiting to swallow us whole. And I knew, I'd just dragged all 4 of us in. That night, I couldn't sleep. The journal sat on the table like a breathing animal, the map tucked inside trembling under the yellow lamp. I'd held many kinds of maps before. Strike maps with red lines marking attack routes, minefield maps blotched with death zones, rescue charts crowded with desperate coordinates. But no map had ever made my hands shake like this one. It felt like a door, and on the other side, I wasn't sure I'd still be myself if I stepped through. Emily sat across from me, her hair falling loose over her cheek, her eyes fixed on the twisted handwriting. She'd managed to translate more lines. Her voice, soft as wind hissing through a crack in the door, filled the room. The sea does not forget. The greedy will be swept away. Only those who move with the rhythm of moon and wind may pass the stone gate. 3 bells will toll, the gate will open. But blood must spill. The last line raised gooseflesh along my arms. I tapped my fingers on the table, analyzing out of old habit. 3 bells equals time signal, maybe a guard shift. Blood must spill equals curse, or trap. To me, curses were just another way to write down truth. Fools die. See this? Emily asked, pointing at a tiny dot near the margin, like a stray blot of ink. I leaned closer. Under the lamplight, the dot wasn't random, it sat exactly where the crescent line crossed a faint symbol. Marker, I said. They didn't have GPS, but they knew how to leave coordinates. Emily smiled faintly. Exactly. Black Henry wasn't just a captain. He was obsessed with codes. Every line he wrote is a puzzle. We compared it against a modern chart she'd pulled from the library archives. The Caribbean spread out like a chessboard dotted with islands. My mind slid back to patrols at sea, maps spread out, wine snapping the canvas, eyes searching distances, currents, bearings. And then I saw something that chilled me. The crescent line on the old map matched almost perfectly with a whirlpool zone the modern chart marked as lethal. "Goddamn," I muttered. Emily tilted her head. "What is it?" He hid the treasure inside a death zone. 1 mile off and the sea swallows you whole. She was silent for a beat, then smiled faintly. That only makes it worth more. I stared at her. I couldn't tell if it was courage or madness, or both. But I knew one thing. I'd already stepped onto this path, and there was no way back. Around 3 a.m., Emily's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She frowned and handed it to me. I answered on speaker. A man's voice rasped low, rough, full of menace. "Miss Carter, that book is not yours. It belongs to the sea." Emily glanced at me. I kept silent. "Others are looking for it. If you're smart, you'll give it back. If not, you and the man beside you will wash ashore as corpses." Click. The line went dead. Emily bit her lip. "They know." I stood, pulling the curtain aside. Down on the street, a small van sat idling, its cabin light faintly glowing. No one stepped out, but I felt eyes watching. "Pack. We leave New Orleans at dawn." Emily nodded, clutching the map tube like it was part of her body. By morning, we were on an early flight to Miami. I've always taken the window seat, not to admire the clouds, but to watch. The rattle of metal wings brought back troop transports overseas, when every shutter could mean shrapnel in the engine. Emily sat beside me, eyes closed, but her hand never left the map case. In my head, the fragments of symbols and phrases formed another chart, a map of hazards. New moon, southeast wind, 3 bells, blood must spill. I scribbled quick notes in my notebook. Prepare for whirlpools. Prepare for the stone gate. Always account for death. I snapped it shut and drew in a long breath. I'd planned missions before where survival odds were 1 in 10. This was the same, only now the enemy wasn't men with rifles. It was the ocean itself. Miami met us with sun sharp as a blade. The air stank of salt and gasoline. I pulled my cap low, guided Emily through the tourist throngs. We rented a shabby motel room near the harbor and started drafting lists. We need a ship, I said. Wood hull tough enough for waves, a hold big enough for spare fuel. Generator, long-range radio, life rafts, cables, flares, medical kits. And, I stopped, locking eyes with her, the people I called. Sarah, Tommy, David, she said. I nodded. They'll come. But tell no one else. Once the word gets out, we're hunted. She pressed her lips tight, nodding. We walked past the old docks. Weathered hulls baked under the sun, ropes groaned against iron cleats. I didn't step aboard, just watched. Some of them could still float, if the right hands touched them. Tommy would be grinning ear to ear in a place like this. Emily stood quietly, her eyes gleaming with a mix of worry and excitement. She whispered, "The sea is beautiful." I gave a bitter laugh. The sea's never beautiful when you've seen bodies wash ashore. She turned, eyes shining with something fierce. Then this time, you'll make it different. This time, you'll survive. I said nothing. Inside, the old question echoed, do I even deserve to survive one more time? That night, I lay on the hotel bed, listening to the far-off surf. Emily sat at the desk, translating another passage. Her voice floated low across the room. Day 18. A storm rose. We lost 7 more. The captain said, the gold will save us. But I only see the gold weighing us down, dragging us faster into the deep. The room went silent. I closed my eyes, but those words carved themselves into me. I knew that tomorrow, when the others arrived, we wouldn't just be chasing Black Henry's dream. We'd be stepping straight into his nightmare. Morning in Miami hit like fire on the skin. We chose a dockside diner, its old wooden tables pressed against windows that looked straight out at the aging ships moored in the harbor. Emily sat across from me, the journal and map case tucked into her backpack at her feet, her eyes never leaving the water. I knew she was waiting, just like me, for the others. The missing pieces of this journey. The first to arrive was Sarah Lopez. She swept into the diner like a gust of wind, white t-shirt, jeans, her hair loose, camera dangling at her chest like a talisman. Spotting me, she let out a shout and nearly knocked over Emily's coffee as she wrapped me in a hug. Jack. Jesus, you're still alive. I figured you'd crawled into some hole and vanished. I laughed, prying her arms off. If I was dead, who else would drag you into this mess? Her grin sparkled, and then she turned quickly to Emily, extending her hand. So you're the one who got him out of the bar. Sarah Lopez, documentary filmmaker. I chase the kind of trouble normal people avoid. Emily shook her hand with a polite smile. I could see her measuring the reckless energy in Sarah's eyes. Sarah dropped into a chair, set her camera on the table, and leaned in conspiratorially. So, the treasure's real, huh? I didn't get the chance to answer before the door creaked open and Tommy Harris shuffled in. Wrinkled shirt, worn khakis, half-burned cigarette dangling between his fingers. His eyes darted around the room, calculating, appraising. When he spotted me, his grin spread wide. Jack. Old bastard, you haven't keeled over yet. Good. That means I can trust this. I clasped his clammy hand, then gestured to a chair. He dropped into it, barked for a beer, and let his gaze slide over Sarah, then Emily, his smile sharpening into something halfway between mockery and hunger. So tell me, he rasped. You're promising gold, right? I'm promising trouble, I said flatly. He burst out laughing, slapping the table. Trouble I can handle. As long as there's something shiny at the end. The mood thickened instantly. Sarah frowned, Emily's stare turned knife-sharp. I stayed quiet. I knew, sooner or later, we'd have to face Tommy's greed head-on. And then the last one arrived, David Clark. Tall, broad-shouldered, skin bronzed, his faded blue shirt stretched across his frame. He moved slow, steady, like the tide itself. He didn't smile, just walked straight to me and took my hand in a grip like steel. "Jack," he said quietly. "I'm here." I nodded. That was enough. He sat, his gaze sweeping over Sarah's eager eyes, Tommy's smirk, Emily's silence. Then he placed his thick hands flat on the table and waited. That was my cue. I pulled the journal from Emily's bag, slid the brittle map out, and spread it across the wood. The air changed. Sarah held her breath, eyes locked. Tommy leaned forward, his hand twitching with greed. Emily straightened, her face solemn. David's expression barely moved, but his eyes darkened, the way the sea looks before a storm. On the yellowed parchment, islands dotted the void, the crescent curve, the serpent coiled around the cross, and the grinning skull. "This is why we're here," I said, my voice low. "A one-way journey. If anyone wants out, this is the time." No one moved. Sarah spoke first, her voice trembling with excitement. "I want to film it all. If we live, it'll be the documentary of a lifetime. If we die, it still will be." Tommy smirked. "I don't give a damn about film. I want the gold. I'll fix the ship, I'll make her run, but when we get there, I'm the first to touch it." Emily's eyes cut like a blade. "Touch the wrong thing, and we all die with you." Tommy shrugged, as if death was just another risk on the ledger. David was silent for a long moment. Then he set his hand on the skull mark. His voice rumbled low. "The sea never forgets. If we go in, we respect it. If not, none of us will return." I looked around at the four faces. A determined archaeologist, a reckless filmmaker, a greedy engineer, a quiet sailor, and me, a washed-up marine who only knew how to survive. A strange crew, but it was all I had. I folded the map and slipped it inside my jacket. "Then we have a team." Outside the window, the Miami sea glared bright, the old ships creaked like whispering ghosts. And I knew, at that moment, our fates were bound together, tied to the secret Black Henry left behind. Miami had two harbors. One gleamed like a postcard, spotless white yachts, flags fluttering, tourists in bright shirts sipping cocktails on deck. The other was cracked and rusted, the smell of oil thick in the air, ropes tangled like old veins, hulks of ships lying in wait for either a last voyage or a slow death. We chose the second. I led the crew down the wooden pier, boards creaking under our weight, the air reeking of salt and rust. Sarah kept her camera rolling, whispering, "The audience will eat this up. An old ship, a bunch of lunatics, and a doomed voyage. Perfect." Emily walked beside me, scanning each vessel as if she were reading a book. Tommy scribbled numbers in his pocket notebook, probably costs, or how much gold he thought he'd get. David trailed behind, his hands brushing hulls here and there, listening to the wood the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. At last, the harbor master pointed out a ship about 60 feet long. Its dark wood was scarred, paint peeling in ragged flakes, the bow rising like a blunt axe into the sky. The ropes sagged, the patched sails hung tired, the old engine sat buried in shadows. "She weathered the '05 hurricane," the old man rasped, voice rough with smoke. "Lost a mast, but the hull never cracked. If you know how to mend her, she'll sail again." I stepped onto the deck. My boot met solid wood. I'd walked plenty of decks, and I knew this one wasn't perfect, but it had a spine. It had survived, and that mattered most. "How much?" I asked. The man named a price high enough to make Tommy choke on his cigarette smoke. But Emily calmly pulled a wad of cash from her bag, counting it neatly. "We'll take her." I frowned at her. "You're really going to dump all your money on a corpse of a ship?" She answered without hesitation. "If we want the treasure, this is the ticket." No arguing with that. The next day, the work began. Tommy disappeared into the engine room, hammer blows echoing like gunfire. Every so often he crawled out, sweat dripping, cursing. "This engine looks like it was built for World War II. But I'll get her breathing again. Trust me." Sarah darted everywhere with her camera, filming rust flakes, cracks, every bruise of age. She even interviewed us mid-repair. "Jack, do you think we'll survive? Emily, is this really the treasure? Tommy, what's the first thing you'll buy with the gold?" I said nothing, Emily scowled, and Tommy grinned wide. a brand new ship, so I'll never have to fix this piece of junk again." David spoke little. He checked every rope, every pulley, tied fresh knots, replaced rotten cord. His big, calloused hands worked slow but sure. I caught him murmuring to the ship as if to an old friend, "One more storm, girl. Just one more." Emily hardly left the journal. She spread it out in the cabin, ruler and pencil in hand, matching Henry's symbols against modern charts. Whenever she found a connection, her eyes lit like fire. Once she called me over, pointing at a line, "Day 20. We left 3 bodies beneath the stone gate." The captain said, "That is the price." I read it, and felt my blood run cold. As for me, I circled, watched, measured. A ragtag group of strangers, bound by a vague goal. An old ship, heading for a death zone. I'd seen this setup before. In the Corps, we called it a mission. And every mission had its body count. That night we gathered on deck, chewing cheap pizza, sipping cheaper beer. Sarah perched her camera on a crate, letting it roll while the sun bled red into the horizon. "What do you think, Jack?" she asked, mouth full. "Will this ship take us to the gold?" I sipped my beer, exhaled. "This ship will take us to sea. As for gold, I can't promise." Tommy chuckled darkly. "If there's gold, I'll be the first to touch it." David lifted his gaze, eyes deep. "Touch the wrong thing, and the sea will swallow you." Silence. Only the slap of waves against the hull. Emily broke it. "Tomorrow, we test her in the water. If she holds, we leave in a week." Sarah cheered, raising her camera. "A week. I'll need more memory cards." I gave a dry smile, but inside I knew, the wheel had turned, and none of us could stop it now. That night, sleep didn't come. I stood alone on deck, the wind knifing cold, the moon casting silver blades across the water. I opened the journal, turned to a page I couldn't forget. "The treasure lies where sea and blood meet. Whoever seeks it will pay with his soul." I shut the book, lifted my eyes to the sky. Part of me trembled, part of me hungered, and I knew, this was no game. This was a one-way road. And we'd already stepped on it. We spent a week coaxing the old ship back to life. Tommy lived in the engine room, his clothes reeking of smoke and oil. Sarah darted everywhere, hauling ropes one minute, filming everything the next, until David barked at her for holding a camera when she should have been using her hands. Emily buried herself in the journal, lifting her head only to read me another half-faded line, her voice steady as if she already knew for certain we would find the place. Launch day came with the sun blazing down. We stood on the pier, watching as a crane lowered the ship into the water. Wood groaned against the sea, but then the hull settled, floating solid. I saw David breathe out, relieved, and Tommy punch the air, "She's still alive." We climbed aboard. Tommy flipped the switch, the engine coughed, sputtered, then roared, belching black smoke. The sound was like an old heart beating again. Sarah squealed with delight. "Perfect. My camera's going to love this shot." Emily only smiled faintly, running her hand along the rail as if touching a dream she'd carried too long. I stepped to the wheel, my hand on cracked wood. The feeling hit me like déjà vu. Once again, I was in command. But this time there was no uniform, no orders, only a strange crew and a voyage that could kill us all. We loaded the ship heavy, barrels of water, dry rations, medicine, cables, flares, even a handful of pistols and rifles I'd bought off an old contact. Tommy cursed through the hauling, but his eyes gleamed when he saw the spare fuel drums. Sarah filmed every crate, chattering like it was a reality show. David checked each knot, every last line. When it was done, we gathered on deck. I looked at them, 4 faces, 4 different lights. Emily's steady fire. Sarah's fevered excitement. Tommy's hungry smirk. David's quiet depth. "After today," I said, my voice low, "there's no turning back. The sea spares no one. If you've got doubts, step off now." No one moved. Only the gulls cried above and the waves slapped against the hull. I nodded. "Then we go." The engine thumped hard as the ship edged out of the harbor. The ropes pulled in, the wheel turned, the bow aimed for the open blue. Behind us, Miami shrank, the skyline fading into the heat. On deck, Sarah shouted over the wind, "We're hunting treasure. God, I'm going to be famous." Tommy puffed smoke, chuckling. "Keep the fame. I just want the gold." Emily stood still, eyes fixed on the horizon. She whispered, "Black Henry, we're following your trail." David laid a hand on the wheel beside mine, his voice a rumble, "She'll hold, if we respect her." I just nodded. I never believed in luck. Only in preparation. But deep down I knew, no preparation was enough against the sea. That first night, I stayed on deck. The air stung with salt, waves slapping in rhythm. Sarah dozed on a folding chair, her camera's red light still blinking. Tommy snored below. David sat silent at the wheel, eyes closed, as if listening to the ocean breathe. Emily sat beside me, the journal spread across her lap. She showed me another faint line. "The treasure lies where sea and blood meet. The stone gate opens when the new moon devours the shadow. But the first to step through must leave his soul behind." She asked quietly, "Do you believe it?" I dragged on a cigarette, stared out at the black water. "I believe in blood. Curse or trap, same result." She fell silent, then gave a small nod, accepting. I tilted my head back. The crescent moon hung like a blade. And I knew, we'd just set foot on a road no one could turn back from. Day 3 at sea. The wind shifted at dawn, the sky turning unnaturally dark. I stood on deck, eyes on the horizon as it thickened to bruised purple. Black clouds lashed across the sky like whip marks. My gut, that old instinct that had kept me alive more than once, screamed. "Storm," I said. David moved to the wheel, eyes narrowing, one hand braced on the mast. "Yes. Faster than forecast. We need to reef the sails." Tommy's head popped up from the engine room, face smeared with oil. "This engine won't hold if the waves hit hard. We should turn back." "The ship doesn't turn back," I snapped. "Once you're out, turning just puts the storm in your teeth." Emily clutched the journal to her chest, her voice trembling. "Is there no way around it?" David shook his head. "No. We endure." We scrambled into motion. David and I hauled down the mainsail, knotting ropes tight. Sarah raised her camera, but I ripped it from her hands. "Not now," I barked. "Grab a line." Her lips pressed tight, she shoved the camera aside and, for the first time, used her soft hands on the hard rope, face flushed with effort. The wind howled like screams. Waves climbed higher, slamming against the hull, spray blinding us. The sky dropped a curtain of black. "Hold the wheel," I roared. David gripped the helm, his shoulders shaking under the strain but his face steady as stone. A wall of water crashed over the deck. Sarah and I went sprawling, knees slamming wood. From below came Tommy's shout, "Water's coming in. Goddammit, we're flooding." I threw him a metal bucket. "Bail it out. Keep the engine alive, Jack." Emily's voice cut through the gale. I looked up, she was clinging to the rail, waves shoving her dangerously close to the edge. I lunged, grabbed her arm, yanked her back. We collapsed in a heap, soaked through, her breath ragged, eyes wide with terror. "Hold the line. Don't let go," I bellowed. She nodded, trembling hands locking onto the rail. The storm screamed for hours. The ship tossed like a toy in a giant's hands. The helplessness felt the same as nights under mortar fire, death waiting in every blast, and nothing to do but hold on. A sudden cry tore through the storm. One of the hired deckhands, a man we'd taken on at port, slipped, his arm trapped in the anchor line. David lunged, but a wave hammered down, the rope snapped tight, and bone cracked loud as gunfire. The man shrieked. David and I dragged him in, wrapped his mangled arm in cloth. Sarah was sobbing openly now, rain and tears running together. And still she clutched her camera. "Why the hell are you filming this?" I shouted. She cradled it like a child, voice breaking. I don't know what else to do." I bit down on the anger. In a storm, everyone finds something to hold. For her, it was the lens. At last, after half a day, the wind began to weaken. The clouds split ragged, a pale light bleeding through. The sea still heaved, but less like a killer and more like a beast catching its breath. The ship rose from one last wave and rocked, spent but afloat. We collapsed on deck, exhausted and drenched. David still clutched the wheel, sweat dripping, his gaze calm. Tommy slumped, shivering, lips pale. Sarah hugged her camera, eyes swollen, lips pressed shut. Emily wrapped the injured man in a blanket, murmuring comfort. I listened to the wood groan under us, and the truth was clear, this was only the beginning. Night fell. We huddled in the cabin around a dim oil lamp. No one spoke much. Emily dressed the deckhand's broken arm. Tommy swigged from a bottle, eyes restless. Sarah sat quiet, unusually so, her camera in her lap. David closed his eyes in the corner, lips moving in some silent prayer. I opened the journal, pages damp and faded, and read. Day 15. The sea rose in fury. We lost 10 more. The captain said, "The gold will save us." I only saw the gold weighing us down, dragging us faster into the deep. I shut it, looking at the weary faces around me. I knew then, the curse of Black Henry hadn't aged a day. And the sea had begun to collect its debt. The sea after the storm wasn't calm, just restless, growling like a beast too tired to sleep. The ship rocked wearily, wood groaning, rope straining with every swell. We were spent. The deckhand's broken arm bled through his bandages, the cloth soaked red. I knew if we stayed drifting, infection would finish him. There's an island ahead, David said, eyes locked on the compass and horizon. I followed his gaze. A dark green smear rising from the endless blue, a small island, thick with trees, fringed by patches of pale sand. The wind still pressed hard, but not enough to kill us. We'll make for it, I decided. Tommy muttered, waste of time. Treasure doesn't wait. I turned, stared him down. You want to haul a corpse the rest of the way. He shut up, squinting out to see through cigarette smoke. We anchored just offshore, lowered the dinghy. Sand sank underfoot as we came ashore, the jungle behind us steaming with rot and salt. Sarah instantly lifted her camera, panning the scene. Shipwrecked explorers on a storm island, viewers are going to lose their minds. Put it down, I snapped. Help carry him. Her lips pressed tight, but she stowed the camera and, with Emily, helped me haul the wounded man onto a tarp laid across the sand. Emily cleaned the wound with fresh water, her hands trembling but steady. David gathered driftwood, coaxing a fire to life. I moved inland. The air shifted the moment I stepped beneath the canopy. No waves, only the hush of palms and the lonely cries of birds. And then I saw it. A skeleton slumped against a tree, arms folded over its chest, skull bowed. Beside it lay a rusted knife, blade nearly eaten through, its hilt carved faintly with letters, HH. I shouted, "Emily, here." She ran to me, breath ragged. Her eyes widened at the sight. Kneeling, she touched the hilt, whispering, "Henry's hand, one of Black Henry's men." We stood in silence. Sarah appeared next, raising her camera, until I snatched it away, shutting it off. "Not this," I said. "This isn't for show." Her jaw tightened, but her eyes still glimmered, fear tangled with fascination. We dug a shallow grave in the sand, laid the bones down. Emily murmured a Latin prayer I didn't understand, her voice trembling. David bowed, hand pressed to his chest. Tommy muttered, "If he died here, he never made it to the treasure, means it's still waiting." I grabbed him by the collar, yanked him close. "Say another word like that, I'll throw you overboard." He smirked, brushing my hand away, but I caught the flicker of fear in his eyes. That night, we huddled around the fire on the beach. Waves hissed against the sand, wind threading through the palms. The injured sailor burned with fever while Emily and Sarah laid cool cloths on his brow. Tommy scribbled in his notebook by firelight, his shadow stretching long across the sand like a ghost. David whittled a piece of wood into a small boat and set it afloat on the tide. "For those who don't come back," he murmured. I opened the journal. Near the margin of the page Emily had translated before was a note, ink different from the rest. Day 16. One of us was left behind on Crescent Island. The knife marks the place. We could not carry him farther. I shut the book, silent. The island beneath us wasn't Crescent, but someone had walked this path before, leaving comrades behind. And now we were doing the same. I looked out at the sea. In the dark, the waves rose, broke white, and vanished. The sea does not forget. And I knew, we were only at the beginning of the debt. We left the island at dawn. The sea had eased, the sun burned red on the horizon, but inside me the storm hadn't passed. That knife with its carved letters clung to my mind, as if the skeleton was still watching us leave. The deckhand with the broken arm drifted in and out of fever in the hammock. Emily changed his bandages. Sarah filmed his pale face through her lens. Tommy avoided looking altogether. David stood at the wheel, eyes half shut, listening. By afternoon, Emily spread the journal across the damp table, sunlight angling through the cabin window, illuminating the faded ink. I sat across from her, cigarette smoke curling, listening. Day 22. We have lost too many. Every island, a corpse. Every storm, a soul. The captain said, the sea wants blood to open the way. I am afraid, but we swore to keep the secret. Any who betray will die by the hand of the seakeeper. Emily looked up, her eyes burning. Do you hear it? The seakeeper. Not just a curse. A name. A thing they believed in. I tapped ash into the tray. Or just a way to name the traps they built. Like mines. Like spikes. No, she said firmly. This was faith. And faith can kill more people than weapons. Silence filled the cabin. Only the sound of the waves and the groan of rope against mast. Sarah huddled in a corner, whispering, what if the curse is real? Tommy barked a laugh, rough and ugly. Then we die. Simple as that. But before I die, I'll lay my hands on gold. I fixed him with a cold stare. One wrong move, and the whole ship dies with you. Remember that. Night fell. A chill wind swept the deck under a sky full of stars. I sat against the rail, staring at the black stretch of sea. Emily stayed inside the cabin, turning pages of the journal, whispering words like prayers. Sarah slept clutching her camera. Tommy snored, drunk. David stood at the helm, eyes wide open, staring into the dark. I must have drifted. In the dream, I stood on a deck, but not ours. A rotting vessel, sails in tatters, the stench of blood everywhere. Around me, pale sailors with hollow eyes dragged rusted swords, staggering toward me with mouths open but no voices. At the center stood a tall figure. Black cloak, wide-brimmed hat hiding his face. In his hand, a sword carved with waves. He lifted his head, and I saw his eyes, burning red, like embers in the dark. His voice rolled low and deep, like the ocean itself. The sea does not forget. The one who carries the map will pay in blood. I jolted awake, sweat soaking me. Real waves crashed against the hull, steady and merciless. My heart hammered. My fists clenched so tight I drew blood from my palms. Emily sat beside me, eyes full of worry. What did you dream? I shook my head, breath ragged. Doesn't matter. What matters is, the sea's watching us now. Morning. Sarah spotted something carved into the hull. Deep grooves, fresh, 3 parallel slashes like claw marks. She panicked, dragging me to see. Tommy scoffed. Wood split in the storm. But I knew wood didn't split in such clean lines. David looked once, then turned away, but his shoulders tightened. Emily flipped through the journal, jabbing at a passage near the end. Last night we heard claws scraping the hull. A sign, the keeper of the sea has scented our blood. No one spoke. Only the wind, heavy as a warning. The second night after my dream, I didn't sleep. I stood watch alone, eyes fixed on the endless black water. And then, I heard it. A faint clatter. Metal on metal. Chains dragging beneath the hull. Not waves. Not rope. Chains. Cold sweat drenched me. My hand tightened around the dagger. I leaned over the rail, only to see moonlight glinting on flat, empty water. Jack. Emily's voice cut the silence. I spun. She stood behind me, pale but steady. You heard it too, didn't you? I said nothing, because I knew, if I spoke it aloud, it would be real. The sea wind swept across the deck, damp and salty. We'd survived the first storm, but the ship still trembled like a beaten animal that hadn't died yet. The sailor with the broken arm drifted in fever inside the cabin, his breath shallow. Emily tended his bandages, eyes dark with exhaustion. Sarah sat by the porthole clutching her camera, but, for the first time since we left port, she wasn't filming. David was steady at the wheel, gaze fixed on the horizon. Only Tommy was different. He paced the deck, clutching his little notebook, muttering under his breath. I glanced down once. Crooked lines, curves, letters, numbers. He was copying the map. I stepped closer, my shadow falling across the page. He startled, snapped the notebook shut, and forced a grin. Don't look at me like that, Jack. I'm just making a backup. You don't want to gamble everything on one piece of rotten paper, do you? I didn't answer right away. I lit a cigarette, blew smoke into the wind. Then I said quietly, betting on greed is a hell of a lot more dangerous. He shrugged, tucking the notebook into his pocket. But his eyes gleamed, sharp, hidden steel. I knew that look. I'd seen it in Mercenaries, the look of a man already calculating how much his comrades were worth to someone else. By late afternoon, Sarah pulled me aside. Her face was serious, nothing like her usual. "Do you notice anything off about Tommy?" "I notice," I said. "Last night," she whispered, "I heard noise in the radio cabin." I peeked. He was tuning the dial, trying to broadcast. When I got close, he shut it off. "Jack, I think he's calling someone." My jaw tightened. The radio was for emergencies only. If Tommy was really transmitting, it wasn't for rescue. We'd never filed an official voyage. That left one possibility: he was selling us out to someone else. "Don't tell Emily yet," I warned. "If the group panics, we'll tear ourselves apart before we even get there." Sarah bit her lip and nodded, though her eyes were wet. She wasn't built for secrets. But at least this time, she trusted me with it. That night, I stayed awake on purpose. The cabin was dim, the oil lamp flickering. The engine hummed low, the sea smacked rhythmically against the hull. Near midnight, I heard the soft creak of the radio door. I crept closer, peered through the gap. Tommy hunched over the set, twisting the dial, ear pressed to the static. The faint glow lit his grin. He whispered, almost lovingly, "Coordinates 32, northeast, I'll repeat every 12 hours. My hand closed tight around my dagger. One step, and I could end this. But I didn't. I'd learned in war, the most useful traitor is the one who doesn't know he's been exposed. I pulled back, returned to the deck. The night air was ice, the moon veiled in clouds. In my chest, another storm gathered, this one human, not ocean. Morning came. Tommy strutted on deck whistling, swinging a bucket to bail water, cigarette clamped in his teeth. Emily asked a question, he grinned wide, saying, "We're going to be rich." "I've got a good feeling." I said nothing. David's eyes flicked to mine once, like he could smell the danger too. But he didn't ask. He was a man of deeds, not words. Sarah was the opposite. She couldn't even look at Tommy, her shoulders tight. I saw her almost whisper to Emily, but when she caught my eye, she stopped. I gave her a nod, a silent reminder, keep quiet. At dusk, I opened the journal. One smeared passage made my blood run cold. Day 25. One among us betrayed. He sent signals to other treasure hunters. That night, they came, their lights glaring like the eyes of devils on the deck. I shut the book, my chest heavy with the bitter truth. Black Henry's crew had faced betrayal too. And we were walking the same cursed path. When I looked up, far on the horizon, a faint light blinked. Not stars. Not lightning. A steady, deliberate signal. Another ship had heard the call. Morning came, and the sea was eerily calm. The water lay dark blue, smooth as glass, broken only by ripples sliding along our hull. But the air on deck was strung tight as wire. We had all seen the light last night. And now, on the northeastern horizon, a dark shape lingered. I raised the binoculars. A vessel, a few miles off, its hull painted a dull gray, no flag, no markings. I didn't need more detail to know, not a fishing boat, not the Coast Guard. "They're following us," I said. Emily stood beside me, jaw tight. They got the signal. Sarah hugged her camera like a child, whispering, "God, this film's getting too real." Tommy whistled low, pretending to be casual, but sweat shone at his temple. David alone stayed steady. He adjusted the wheel, voice even. "They're holding distance. Not ready to show themselves. But sooner or later, they will." We gathered on deck to talk. I said, "Two options. 1, they're scouting, waiting for the right moment. 2, they'll hit us near the destination. Either way, we can't let them cling to our wake." Sarah blurted, panicked, "Can't we just turn back to Miami?" I shook my head. Turning back just gives them the harbor to trap us in. At sea, there's only forward. Emily set the journal on the table, her voice iron. "It's written here, the traitor led the Sea Devils. We lost the night their lights fell across the deck. I think, history is repeating." All eyes turned to Tommy. He lifted both hands, forced a grin. "Hey, don't look at me like that. I'm not stupid enough to sell myself out. You only need to be stupid enough to sell the rest of us, I said, voice flat. He cracked his knuckles, jaw tight, but said nothing more. By late afternoon, we adjusted course a mile off the charted line, testing to see if we could shake them. The gray ship shifted too, mirroring every turn. Through the binoculars, I saw it clearly, not fishing, not working. Just moving. Always parallel. Always there. David frowned. Seasoned sailors. They know how to keep pace. Who are they? Sarah asked. Treasure hunters, Emily said. They've tracked us from New Orleans. They know about the journal. Or mercenaries, I added. Either way, their target isn't saving us. It's the gold. No one spoke after that. The evening wind carried a sour, metallic tang. That night, clouds smothered the sky, no stars, no moon. We set watches, 2 at a time. Mine was with David. Near midnight, the dark horizon flared. A floodlight exploded across our deck, white and merciless. Even with my eyes shut, the afterimage seared red into my vision. Sarah screamed. Emily clutched the journal to her chest. Tommy froze, pale. The beam swept across us once, then blinked out. The ocean fell back into blackness. But I still saw the gray hull, just a blur against the night. It wanted us to know it was there. It wanted to feed us fear. David whispered, voice like gravel, this isn't a game. They'll make their move soon. I gripped the dagger at my belt. My dread had solidified into something real. The sea wasn't the only thing out to claim us. The wind shifted early. The sky was slate gray, clouds dragging across it like blades slashing the horizon. I stood at the bow, eyes narrowed. My gut screamed, the same instinct that had saved me from death too many times before. Something's wrong, I muttered. David was suddenly beside me, his gaze locked on the horizon. The water's changing color, he said quietly. He was right. The sea ahead had gone from deep blue to ash gray. Small ripples spun in circles, spreading wider with every minute. Emily came up from below, the journal clutched tight. She flipped to a marked page, her finger trembling as she pointed at the faded ink. Day 30. The sea split its jaws, spinning like the devil's drain. Half the ships vanished. Only when the crescent moon swallowed shadow, when the southeast wind filled the sails, did we escape the circle of death. Whirlpool, she whispered. This is the crescent mark on the map. Sarah panicked. We need to turn back. Can't, I snapped. Once you're in the current, turning back only kills you faster. Tommy cursed, bolting into the engine room. Then it's all on the engine. If it dies, so do we. The whirlpool came into full view. A vast hole spun in the center of the sea, water roaring as it poured into a bottomless throat. Waves pitched and collapsed into it, swallowed whole. Our ship was just an insect rushing toward the mouth of a beast. Hold the wheel, I roared. David's muscles corded as he gripped the helm, veins standing out on his neck. Emily clung to the rail, eyes fixed on the page, chanting like a spell, wait for the southeast wind, wait for the crescent moon to shadow. Sarah sobbed, clutching her camera to her chest, but still tried to film. I ripped it out of her hands, shouting, not now. The pull hit us hard. The ship tilted violently. A fuel drum rolled across the deck and plunged into the sea, vanishing in seconds. I dove for a cable, straining to lash it down. Jack, Emily screamed. When the crescent swallows shadow, let the sail loose, catch the southeast wind. I looked up. The crescent moon was half hidden behind a smear of storm cloud. The wind shifted, rushing strong out of the southeast, filling the canvas like a drumbeat. Now, I bellowed. David loosed the auxiliary sail. The canvas snapped open, the wind slammed it full, and the ship lurched sideways, veering hard out of the whirlpool's grasp. The hull shuddered, timbers screaming, cold water washing across the deck. For a moment, I swore I heard a roar from deep below, like the sea itself crying out in rage. Then we shot clear, riding a wave that spat us out with a surge of spray. We sprawled across the deck, gasping. I looked back. The whirlpool still spun, an immense black eye staring at us. We'd lost a fuel drum, a lifeboat, a tangle of lines. Worse, we'd lost pieces of ourselves. Sarah shook uncontrollably, Emily's lips had gone pale, Tommy stumbled up from the engine room, face ashen but grinning madly. See, we lived. And if we lived, then the treasure's real. I wanted to smash his face in, but held back. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and scrawled, "Whirlpool, escaped. Losses, fuel, raft. Morale, shaken." David slumped against the rail, eyes still on the horizon. "This path isn't for the faint-hearted," he murmured. I didn't answer. All I could hear was the echo from the journal, "Half the ships vanished." And I knew, we'd only barely made it into the half that didn't. After the maelstrom, our ship staggered like an old beast, the engine coughing like a pair of dying lungs. The wind had gone slack, and the sea lay flat, an eerie, ashen blue. David stayed at the helm, eyes fixed on the chart. Emily sat by the cabin window, turning the brittle pages of the journal, her finger tracing a faint line of ink. Day 33. We saw the wreckage of another ship swallowed by the sea demon. In its hold, a key. A key to the stone door. She looked up, voice low. "There's a wreck nearby." Right then Sarah, sweeping the horizon with her camera, screamed, "Look." In the distance, the water churned strangely. A broken mast jutted from the surface, dark wood crusted with barnacles, rocking with the swell. I raised the binoculars. A wreck, no doubt, its hull long gone beneath, only bones left floating. "The tide dragged it up," David muttered. My heart hammered. We'd hit a turning point. We dropped anchor 100 yards out. The water was black, the bottom lost in shadows. I made the call, I would dive. "You're insane," Emily shot up, eyes flashing. "There are currents down there. They'll drag you to hell." "I've been in worse," I said. "And if the journal's right, this is our only lead." David laid a hand on my shoulder. "I'm going with you." We suited up, clipped on safety lines, strapped waterproof lamps to our wrists. Sarah shook as she filmed, her voice trembling. Tommy just chain-smoked, muttering, "If there's gold down there, if there's gold." I went first. The water knifed into me, freezing, 1,000 blades across my skin. My lamp cut the dark in pale blue beams. The wreck rose out of the gloom, splintered timbers, smothered in weed, fish flickering between the cracks. David followed, his light sweeping in arcs. We forced our way into a split hull. Inside was pure shadow, beams rotting, scraps of fabric drifting like ghosts. My light caught a broken chest, only shards of rusted iron remained. Then I saw it. A key, nearly the length of my hand, iron, corroded thick with rust but unmistakable. Its head was carved with the emblem of a serpent coiled around a cross, the same mark etched on our map. I seized it. At that instant, a current ripped through. My body spun, yanked sideways. The line went taut, my vision bursting with spots. David lunged, locking his arms around me, dragging hard. We slammed into a beam, pain knifing through my ribs. I clenched my fist, refusing to let the key slip. We thrashed against the flow until, finally, we broke free, bursting into open water, bubbles roaring around us. When we surfaced, I tore the regulator out, gasping, heart splitting in my chest. "Did you get it?" Emily shouted from the deck. I raised my hand. The iron key hung heavy, streaked with green rust, glinting with something unholy in the sun. Back aboard, everyone closed in. Sarah zoomed in with the lens, her voice shaking. "Proof, this is real." Tommy lunged forward, eyes wild. "Let me hold it," he demanded. I shoved him back. "No, it stays with me. You don't know metalwork. I do. I know how to handle relics." "I know one thing," I said coldly. "This key opens a door, or a grave. And no one dies early because of your greed." His jaw tightened, but he stepped back. His eyes, though, never left the key. Emily wiped it gently with a cloth, her voice hushed. "The journal says, the key opens the stone door, but locks the soul within. Whoever carries it will be marked by the seakeeper." The rusted edge had sliced my palm. Blood dotted my skin, mixing with the salt. I squeezed tighter. I would not let go. That night, I kept the key under my pillow. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard metal scraping wood, the clink of chains dragging across the deep. In my haze, I saw those burning red eyes again, the cloaked figure staring straight into me. His voice. Ever since the iron key landed in my hands, the air aboard had thickened. No one spoke it aloud, but we all felt the shift. I never let the key out of reach, wrapped in cloth and tucked beneath my jacket. Every time my fingers brushed it, it felt like holding a cold snake, waiting for its chance to strike. Tommy watched me more often now. His hunger burned openly in his eyes. Sarah grew wary, clutching her camera but no longer with the carefree spark she once had. Emily buried herself deeper in the journal, filling her own notebook with cramped notes. And David, silent at the helm, though I knew he heard more than he let on. It all broke one afternoon. Sarah came to me in the cabin, her face pale, her arms wrapped tight around her camera. "Jack," she whispered, "you need to see this." She rewound a clip she'd shot at dawn, when she'd left the lens running unattended on deck. The footage shook with grain and static, but clear enough. Tommy, hunched over the radio. The lamplight lit his face, twisted in a greedy grin as he turned the dials. His voice was low but unmistakable. "Coordinates, moving south, we'll signal again at midnight." Sarah froze the frame, her eyes wide. "You see, he's calling someone. He's the one who brought that other ship." I breathed deep, forcing myself calm. The tape was undeniable, but if I called him out head-on, we'd tear ourselves apart before the sea ever got the chance. I needed to play this carefully. That evening, we ate thin soup out of cans. I laid the journal and the key on the table, acting casual. Sarah was uncharacteristically quiet. Emily's eyes flicked toward Tommy again and again. He chewed loudly, eyes darting. "Tommy," I said. He looked up, squinting. "What?" "The radio. You want to explain." Silence. Only the slap of waves against the hull. Sarah swallowed hard, Emily's knuckles whitened on her spoon, and David slowly set his down. Tommy's face faltered, then he barked a laugh. "So someone's spying on me, huh? I was testing the signal. What if we needed rescue?" "Rescue?" My voice cut sharp. "We never filed a course. No one knows we're out here, except that shadowing ship." He clammed up. Then he slammed his spoon down, voice rising. "Fine. I called them. So what? You think I'm betting my life on a pile of rotting paper? I'm not dying in the middle of the ocean for some cursed treasure. If someone stronger's out there, I'll take my chances with them." Sarah shot to her feet. "You betrayed us." "Betrayal," he sneered. "You're just a kid with a camera. What do you know about life and death? Jack, you tell me, you were a soldier. You know the truth. The higher your odds of survival, the more you grab hold of them." I stared at him, the film still running in my mind. His choice was made. "Listen close, Tommy," I said, my voice low, every word weighted. "You're still breathing on this ship because we need your hands in the engine room. But one more wrong step, and I'll throw you overboard myself." His face drained, but he tried to sneer. "You wouldn't." I stood, drew my dagger, and drove it into the table. The blade quivered in the wood. "Try me." The air grew heavy. Emily whispered, pleading, "Jack, don't." David stayed silent, his hand resting on a coil of rope, ready. At last, Tommy stepped back, laughing thinly. "Fine, I'll behave. But when the treasure's right in front of us, don't expect me to stand aside." He stormed down into the engine room. I sat back down, my hand still on the hilt. Sarah trembled, her eyes red. "We can't trust him, Jack." "What do we do?" "We keep him alive, for now. We still need this ship moving." Emily lowered her head. "The journal says, the traitor opened the way for the sea demon. We're repeating the same tragedy." I nodded slowly. I'd known it already, but hearing her speak it chilled me to the bone. That night, I stood on deck with the iron key in my fist, its cold seeping into my bones. Out on the horizon, the shadowing ship still lingered, its faint light blinking like a heartbeat. Tommy had given them enough to close in. Sooner or later, they'd make their move. And I knew, we had crossed into the most dangerous stretch of all. The enemy wasn't just out there on the sea. He was already standing on our deck. The sea was black as ink, the crescent moon hidden in clouds, fading in and out like a dying lamp. Our ship drifted, its patched sails groaning, its weary engine coughing in the dark. Behind us, the light from the shadowing vessel blinked closer, step by step. I stood on deck with a dagger on my hip, a pistol tucked in my jacket. My heart beat slow but steady, the rhythm I knew well before battle. David gripped the wheel, eyes unblinking. Emily sat near the cabin hatch, clutching the journal like a talisman. Sarah trembled with her camera, then lowered it. For the first time, she couldn't bring herself to aim it at the truth. Tommy hid in the engine room, but I knew he heard the rumble of the other ship growing louder. "They're speeding up," David murmured. I nodded. "Get ready." The roar of their engine split the night. The ship lunged at us, its floodlights blasting the deck white. I squinted, catching the shapes of armed men crowding their rails. "Down!" I bellowed. The first burst of gunfire rang out, bullets sparking against the rail. Sarah screamed, sprawling. I yanked her behind a crate. David spun the wheel hard, the ship lurching, a wave crashing over the deck. "I need fire," I shouted. Emily hurled me a small can of fuel. I soaked a rag, lit it, and hurled it into the gap between us. Flames flared, forcing their vessel to veer aside. But they came on, relentless. Then crash, their hull slammed into ours. The deck shook violently, wood splintering, spray drenching us. Grappling hooks clanged across, biting into our rails. "They're boarding," Sarah shrieked. I raised my pistol and fired. One figure toppled into the sea, his scream lost in the waves. But 3, 4 others vaulted aboard, knives gleaming. David roared, swinging a crowbar, smashing one man's skull. Blood sprayed across the planks. Emily crouched behind a crate, still clutching the journal. Sarah, half panicked, lifted her camera again, the image shaking so badly it barely held. I charged, dagger in hand, ramming it into a man swinging at David. He fell with a guttural cry, blood mingling with seawater across the boards. The brawl stretched into a nightmare, gunfire, blades clashing, the ship groaning beneath us. Emily screamed as a raider seized her, ripping at the journal. I lunged, drove steel into his back, and tore her free. "Keep it safe. Don't let them touch it," I roared. She nodded, tears in her eyes, clutching the book as if it were her heart. Then an explosion boomed. Black smoke belched from the engine room. Tommy's voice rose in panic. "They hit the engine. She's gonna blow." I cursed, dragging Sarah and Emily down behind cover. Bullets whined overhead, ripping through the sails. The ship pitched hard, seawater pouring over the deck. Still, David held the wheel. Blood streamed down his arm, but he never faltered. With a roar, he spun it, the ship lurching, hurling one attacker into the sea. I fired my last 2 rounds, dropping another pair. The rest snarled, yanked their hooks loose, and leapt back to their vessel. Their floodlights blinked out. The engine roar faded into the distance. They weren't out to finish us, only to leave us crippled, bleeding, easy prey. Silence returned, heavy as stone. The deck stank of blood, smoke, and salt. One of our hired deckhands lay motionless, chest torn by a bullet. David knelt, closing the man's eyes with a rough hand. Sarah sobbed openly, abandoning her camera for the first time. Emily clung to me, whispering, "We almost lost everything." I scanned the wreck, sail shredded, engine coughing its last, the hull split wide. We were alive, but the ship was dying beneath us. I knew then, this journey was no longer about treasure. It was survival, against the sea, against other men, and tonight had only been the overture. After that night of blood and fire, dawn rose with no beauty. The sun burned red like an open wound, bleeding its light across a sea stained with yesterday's ghosts. Our ship listed, sails shredded, smoke still curling from the battered engine room. We were alive, but no one dared call it victory. I walked slowly across the deck, boots crunching over dried blood. The dead deckhand lay wrapped in canvas, bound tight with rope. Emily knelt beside him, whispering a prayer, her eyes swollen but her voice steady. Sarah sobbed, hands trembling, her camera abandoned for the first time. David stood silent, his scarred hands resting on the shrouded body. His head bowed. His voice was rough when he spoke. "We have to give him back to the sea." I nodded. Together we lifted the body onto the rail. The morning wind cut cold, waves rising in a slow rhythm. I tied the last knot, looked once more at the young face that had laughed with us only nights ago. Then I let go. The body slipped beneath the surface. The sea swallowed him whole. Only white foam spread, then vanished. No trace left, as if he had never existed. We collapsed onto the deck, drained. Sarah hiccuped through tears. "If we hadn't come on this trip, he'd still be alive, if I hadn't filmed, if I hadn't." It's not your fault, I cut in, my voice raw but firm. The sea takes who it wants. All we can decide is how we survive. She broke down, burying her face against Emily's shoulder. The weight pressed heavier on me. Tommy stumbled out of the engine room, face streaked with oil. The engine will run, but not for long. We've lost the spare sail, fuel's low. If we don't turn back, we'll be stranded. We're not turning back, Emily said at once, eyes blazing. The treasure is close. The journal speaks of the Isle of Mist. This is the last gate. If we quit now, every death, every wound, it's all for nothing. Tommy sneered, ready to argue, but her stare froze him into silence. That evening we patched what we could, sewing scraps into torn canvas. David, arm bandaged, worked as if the pain didn't exist. Sarah cleaned her lens, but never raised the camera. Emily filled her notebook with new translations, ink smudged by salt wind. I walked the perimeter of the deck, touching splintered planks, scorched edges. The battle replayed in my mind, spotlights, gunfire, the stench of blood. I remembered another battlefield, years ago, when my unit fell and I was the last left standing. I thought I'd buried that nightmare. But here it was again. That night I drank alone, the iron key hidden beneath my coat. I pulled it out under the lantern glow. Cold, heavy, rust seeping into my skin. In my head, the voice of the cloaked figure echoed, "You took it. The sea will take your blood." My grip tightened until it cut my palm. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of watching more of them die because of me. Morning came. Emily gathered us all on deck. Wind tangled her hair, but her voice cut clear. "I know you're exhausted. So am I. But look at us, we've made it this far. Through storms, whirlpools, bullets, and knives. If we turn back now, every sacrifice was meaningless. But if we push forward, we'll make history. Black Henry's treasure is real. I believe it. And I need you to believe with me." Sarah wiped her eyes, nodding weakly. David said only, "I go to the end." Tommy snorted, but didn't object. They all turned to me. I breathed deep, studying each face. Beaten, bruised, but still here. I couldn't let them break apart. "All right," I said. "We keep going. But remember this, our lives are tied together now. If one betrays, we all die." I let my eyes lock on Tommy as I spoke. He looked away. That afternoon, we raised what sails we had left. The battered ship pushed eastward, creaking, into waters unmarked on any chart. Ahead, a wall of fog began to rise, swallowing the horizon whole. Emily whispered, "The Isle of Mist." My heart pounded. I knew, that was where the true curse waited. The mist came with the dawn. At first, it was only thin white veils drifting across the water. But the deeper we sailed, the thicker it grew, wrapping around the ship like wet cloth. By noon, sky and sea had merged into one solid gray. There was no horizon anymore. I stood on deck, coat soaked through, eyes straining but seeing nothing beyond the blur. The compass needle spun wildly, north, then east, then nowhere. David gripped the wheel, sweat rolling down his brow despite the icy wind. "No more wind," he muttered. "We're drifting." Emily opened the journal, her voice trembling but steady enough to read aloud. Day 40. We entered the fog. The compass spun, the winds died. From the depths came drums, beating like the heart of the seakeeper. And then, as if on cue, it began. Thoom, thoom, deep, muffled beats rolled up from beneath the water. Not waves. Not engines. A rhythm, steady and slow, like a distant war drum. Sarah gasped, clutching her camera to her chest, eyes wide. Tommy cursed, hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette, flame after flame sputtering out. "Stay calm," I growled, though sweat dampened my palms. We pressed on. The fog thickened until even standing a few feet apart, we could barely see each other. I ordered everyone to tie ropes around their waists, securing them to the deck in case the sea tried to swallow us whole. Then it came, a shadow sliding beneath the hull. Long, massive, moving with purpose. Sarah screamed, dropping her camera to the deck, its red light blinking as it captured nothing but ripples breaking the silence. David's hands tightened on the wheel. His voice was low, grim. Not fish. Something else. By evening, the drums stopped. Replaced by a new sound. Chains. The unmistakable clink, Clink, clink of heavy iron dragged across wood. The noise circled the hull, scraping from below. David and I leaned over with lanterns, but the mist swallowed everything. Emily clutched the journal, lips pale. It says, "He who hears the chains has been marked. From here, no one can return." I clenched my dagger, jaw tight. If it were men, I knew how to fight. But this thing you couldn't shoot, couldn't stab, what weapon could hold it back? Close to midnight, the fog began to thin. Shapes rose ahead. At first, just shadows. Then, looming figures took form, stone sentinels lining the shoreline. They stood twice the height of a man, carved as warriors in helmets, spears clutched in hand. But their faces were worn smooth by time, nothing left but hollow sockets for eyes. Mist clung to them, giving the illusion they had just stepped from their graves. Sarah trembled, whispering, "Oh God, the keepers." Emily read again, voice breaking. Day 41. We saw the statues. The captain said they are the gate. The keepers have no eyes, but their souls will watch us forever. I narrowed my gaze at the stone line. Lifeless as they were, I swore I felt their hollow stares pressing into us, cold as iron. David turned toward me, his voice low, steady. The Isle of Mist. I nodded slowly, heart pounding. After storms, whirlpools, and blood, we had reached the place Black Henry had written of centuries ago. But I knew, this was no ending. This was the door opening into the true horror that awaited. We rowed ashore in the dinghy. The mist was so thick that even my outstretched hand faded into blur. The sand beneath our boots was icy cold, as if dusted with ash. The stone statues towered along the beach, massive warriors, spears across their shoulders, empty sockets staring forever out to sea. Wind whistled through the cracks in the rock, sounding like a chorus of sighs. Emily led the way, clutching the journal to her chest, eyes darting across its faded lines. She pointed toward the dense tree line. "In here," the captain wrote, "beyond the keepers, find the stone gate where the mountain meets the sea." David and I pushed ahead to clear the path. Sarah trailed with her camera trembling in her hands, the red light blinking. Tommy dangled a cigarette from his lips, but the mist smothered every spark of his lighter. We trudged through the sand and into the forest. No birds, no insects, only the heavy smell of damp rot and brine. Branches clawed at our hair and clothes with brittle fingers. I felt eyes, thousands of them, watching from behind the fog. Finally, the trees thinned. Before us rose a cliff wall, plunging straight into the sea. In its center gaped a fissure, carved with waves and serpents. I raised my light and saw the groove of a keyhole etched deep in the stone. Emily whispered, "The stone gate." I pulled the iron key from my coat. It was icy, its corroded edges biting my palm. The moment I raised it, the sound of chains rattled faintly across the mist, answering. "Jack," Sarah's voice broke. "Are we sure we should open this?" I looked at her, then at the others. Emily's eyes burned with fevered light. David stood silent, steady, but gave a single nod. Tommy trembled with eagerness, hunger gleaming in his gaze. I drew a deep breath and slid the key into the groove. A screeching grind, echoed, like bones snapping in rotten wood. The gate shuddered. The mist spiraled violently, and the crack widened. A blast of cold air rushed out, reek of brine, earth, and old blood. Instantly, I was back in war bunkers, where corpses and rusted steel shared the same stale air. "Move," I ordered. We descended the slick stone steps. Our flashlights swept across walls etched with symbols, waves, skulls, serpents coiled around crosses. Sarah filmed in jerks, the lens shaking. Emily scribbled madly in her notebook, hand trembling, eyes aflame. The deeper we went, the heavier the air pressed on our lungs. And then we saw them. Lining both sides of the passage were skeletons. Dozens of them, slumped against the walls, clutching rusted spears, eye sockets empty. Some still wore shattered helmets, jaws frozen mid-scream. Sarah whimpered and dropped her camera, it clattered across the stone. Tommy cursed under his breath, though his lips were ashen. David halted, hand pressed to his chest, murmuring a prayer. Emily whispered, They were Black Henry's crew. They died to guard the secret." I walked slow, eyes locked on their hollow sockets. It felt less like they had died, and more like they were still standing watch, waiting for the next fool to step forward. The passage ended at a colossal iron door. Its surface bore the carving of a skull, jaw agape, darkness yawning inside. I laid my hand against it, cold enough to pierce bone. The moment I touched it, the door vibrated, a low hum echoing like drums from the deep. Emily sucked in a sharp breath. This is the final door. The journal says, he who lays his hand upon it, the sea will record his name. He who opens it, his soul is no longer his own. Sarah broke, sobbing, Jack, don't. Please, don't open it. Tommy shouted over her, open it. The gold's right there. After all we've lost, turning back now is suicide. David's eyes locked with mine, calm but grave. If we open it, we'd better be ready to pay the price. I drew in a long breath, staring at the corroded key in my palm, then at the skull door waiting before us. My heartbeat thundered like the sea drums. I knew, in this moment, whatever choice I made would decide everything. The iron door roared like something bellowing from the earth itself. I twisted the key one final time, rusted metal groaning, crack, crack, then boom. The gate burst open. A blast of icy air rushed out, thick with damp stone, rust, and the copper tang of old blood. Our flashlights cut through the dark. And we saw. Behind the door yawned a massive vault. High ceilings, moss-streaked stone walls, and in the center, piled to the height of a hill, was gold. Bars stacked like bricks, chests of silver thrown open, coins scattered across the floor, pearls and rubies, skulls encrusted with jewels, all blazing in the beams of our lights like 1,000 flames. Sarah's mouth fell open, her camera trembling in her hands. Emily covered her mouth, eyes wet with tears. David exhaled, a sound that was equal parts awe and grief. And Tommy roared with laughter. His voice echoed madly through the cavern. See, gold, real gold. We're rich. We'll be kings of the sea. He lunged forward, scooping up handfuls of coins, letting them pour through his fingers. He kissed a bar of gold, cackling, eyes gleaming like a rabid animal. But I didn't feel joy. I saw a trap. The journal's words flashed in my head. The treasure lies where sea and blood meet. Whoever touches it, their soul will be held. I stepped forward slowly. My beam swept the ceiling, catching deep cracks, dust trickling down. The stone floor beneath the treasure was fractured too, seawater seeping up through hairline fissures. Careful, I barked. Don't take too much. Tommy barked back a laugh. You're insane. It's right here, what are you waiting for? He shoved a bar of gold into his pack, the metallic clang echoing far too loudly, rolling through the chamber. A second later, the ground trembled beneath our boots. Emily screamed, stop. You're waking it. Tommy's eyes flared. Waking what? There's nothing here but gold. David leaned close to me, his voice low and grim. Jack, the ceiling's about to give. I nodded, cold settling in my gut. The rumbles deepened, dust raining down. But I knew the danger wasn't just falling stone. Sarah's voice cracked as she panned her camera toward the shadows. Oh God, did you see that? That skeleton, its head just moved. I spun. In the corner sat a figure in rusted armor, jaws frozen open, skeletal hands gripping a shattered sword. And I swore, I saw its skull tilt, those black sockets turning toward us. Emily whispered, the keeper. The air pressed down heavy, my heartbeat pounding in rhythm with the groan of stone above. I grabbed Tommy, yanking him back. Enough. You want to live, get out, now. He shoved me off, eyes wild. No one's stopping me. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He flung another bar aside, it clattered, rolled, and slipped into a fissure in the floor. The crash rang out, then silence. And then it came, an earth-shaking roar, rising from below, like the sea itself bellowing in rage. The chamber convulsed. Stones cracked loose, crashing down in slabs. Out, I roared. Move. Emily clutched the journal tight, sprinting. Sarah ran sobbing, camera still rolling as the image jolted wildly. David hoisted his pack and helped drag the others. Tommy lingered, eyes still locked on the mountain of gold. I bellowed, stay, and you die with it. Finally, he bolted, clutching a small chest to his chest. We burst out of the gate just as the vault collapsed behind us. The ground quaked, dust billowed, the deafening sound of stone burying metal, gold clashing in a funeral dirge. I collapsed on the ground outside, chest heaving, ears ringing. Emily's voice shook, raw with both terror and awe. We saw it, the treasure. I looked back at the sealed gate, now buried under tons of stone. Through the mist, I felt the eyeless stares of the statues outside fixed on us still, a silent warning. We had crossed the line. We collapsed onto the sand, gasping for breath. Behind us, the vault lay buried, dust drifting across the shore. The echo of treasure crashing down still rumbled faintly, like mocking laughter from deep underground. Emily clutched the journal to her chest, tears streaming but her grip unyielding. Sarah's camera shook violently, the footage blurred by her trembling hands. Tommy hugged a small chest like a rabid animal, eyes bloodshot and wild. David stood before us all, gaze locked on the sea. "They're here," he said. I looked up. Through the fog, floodlights cut across the shore. Engines roared. The gray ship was pulling in. Dark figures crowded the deck, rifles in hand. My heart slammed in my chest. They weren't waiting anymore. They knew the treasure was here, and they'd kill us to take it. "Back!" I barked, dragging Emily and Sarah into the line of towering stone statues. The guardians loomed above, hollow eyes staring outward. I crouched behind one, pistol drawn. David gripped a crowbar, Tommy brandished a knife. Boots pounded on sand. Voices shouted. Floodlights swept over us. The intruders stormed forward, their command ringing out. "Hand over the map and the treasure, and you live." I fired the first shot. The lead man dropped, the gunfire cracking like thunder through the fog. Instantly, bullets ripped back at us, pinging off stone, spraying sand. A statue shattered into fragments. Sarah screamed, curling into Emily's arms. David roared, charging out and smashing his crowbar into a man's skull. Blood splattered across the stone guardian. I squeezed off 2 more shots, ducking as bullets hissed past my ear. Through the chaos, I heard Tommy scream, "The treasure's mine. I won't die empty-handed." He bolted into open fire, clutching the chest. "Tommy!" I shouted. But it was too late. A hail of bullets punched through his chest. He crumpled to the sand, coughing blood, still clinging to the gold. He laughed, a broken, mad rasp, before the light went out of his eyes. The ground trembled. The sea drums began, booming from the deep. The statues shuddered, sand cascading from their shoulders. Sarah whispered in terror, "The keepers, they're waking." And they were. From the collapsed tunnel, skeletal figures lurched into the fog. Empty sockets blazed with eerie green light. Rusted swords gripped in bony hands. They moved forward, slow but unstoppable. The mercenaries panicked. Gunfire erupted wildly, riddling bones. The skeletons fell, only to rise again, advancing relentlessly. "Run!" I bellowed. We sprinted for the dinghy. David hauled Sarah, I dragged Emily. Bullets cracked, screams tore the night, mingling with the drums and the clatter of chains. I glanced back just long enough to see the keepers descend upon the mercenaries, rusted blades slicing through flesh. Blood sprayed into the fog, painting it crimson. We shoved the dinghy into the surf and rowed with everything we had. Behind us, the island convulsed. Statues toppled, the shore collapsing in clouds of dust. The screams of men and the shrieks of bone carried across the waves, drowned by the endless pounding of the drums. Emily sobbed, clutching the journal like her own heart. Sarah filmed through tears, whispering, "God, it's all real." David rode, his face carved from iron. I fired blindly over my shoulder, keeping anything from chasing too close. As we pulled farther out, the island vanished into a blood-red fog. The drums thundered still, shaking us to the core. And I knew, we hadn't escaped the curse. We'd only borrowed a few more days to carry it farther out to sea. The night sea was ink black, the wind howling in bursts. We rowed hard, arms numb, hearts still hammering from the horror. Behind us, the Isle of Mist drowned in blood-red fog, statues toppling one by one, the drums of the deep still thundering. Emily clutched the journal, tears streaming down her face. David rowed with all his strength, muscles straining, breath ragged. I sat at the stern, pistol in hand, eyes fixed on the fog behind us, ready for whatever might crawl out. Sarah huddled in the middle, shaking, her camera trembling in her grip. She pointed the lens back at the island, whispering, "They'll never believe, but I have to show them, all of it." When we reached our battered ship, we scrambled aboard. The hull cracked, sails torn, the engine wheezing, but it was all we had left. We hauled Tommy's chest onto the deck, the one he had died clutching. It was heavy, its corners still stained with his blood. Emily looked away. David only shook his head. I set it aside, unopened. To me, it wasn't treasure, it was his grave. We raised anchor, the crippled vessel drifting away from the island. The fog thinned, but the sky stayed gray. The drums faded into the distance, replaced by the old rhythm of waves. I wanted to believe we were free, but I knew better. The sea never forgives. The next 3 days were hell. The ship leaked constantly, David and I taking shifts bailing water. Emily feverishly translated the last pages of the journal, her hands trembling, fever burning in her eyes. Sarah kept filming, nearly mad, capturing everything, as hauling buckets, Emily coughing, David silently knotting ropes. Sarah, rest, I told her. She shook her head, eyes hollow, dark rings beneath them. No, if I stop, everything we've lived through disappears. There must be proof. If I die, the film will speak for me. Her words chilled me to the bone. On the third night, a storm rose. Not as brutal as the last, but enough to break a crippled ship. Waves crashed, wind ripped the patched sails, water poured over the deck. In the chaos, I heard her scream. Sarah was flung against the rail, nearly tossed into the sea. I lunged, caught her wrist. The camera slipped from her grip, splashing into the depths, its red light vanishing. Hold on, I roared, pulling her in. But another wave struck, tilting the ship hard. My grip slipped. Jack, she cried, eyes wide with terror. And then she was gone, swept into the black water, swallowed by the storm. Sarah, Emily screamed, sobbing. I moved to dive after her, but David seized me, iron strong. No, you'll both drown. I fought him, heart breaking, but reason stopped me cold. We could only watch as the sea erased her, leaving nothing but foam. Morning came calm. Only 3 of us remained. Emily collapsed against me, her tears exhausted. David stayed silent, eyes rimmed red. I stood at the rail, chest heavy, staring at the horizon. How many had we lost? The deckhand, Tommy, now Sarah. Every step forward, the sea demanded blood. Just as the journal had warned, he who seeks the treasure pays in souls. Days later, the horizon finally broke. Land shimmered far away. Against all odds, the battered ship had carried us back to the world, bearing 1 chest of gold, 1 journal, and wounds that would never heal. Emily whispered, voice raw, Sarah, at least she kept the images. That's the real treasure. David nodded, voice gravelly. The treasure isn't gold, it's the story. I stayed silent. They were right, but I knew another truth, the sea never forgets. It had etched our names into its curse. I raised my head, stared at the endless blue, and whispered. The sea remembers. Thank you so much for listening to the entire story. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like and a share to support a new writer like me.